Howdy there, friends and faithful listeners, and welcome to the Bible Explained on this absolutely beautiful morning. And I am so thankful you're here with me on the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the Queen of Sheba, who she was, what she did, and why Jesus commends her in the New Testament. So I really hope your week is going well so far. Mine is going just splendidly, though I am shocked that Thanksgiving is in like a week. I am just not ready for it this year. But I'm still looking forward to it because my family is coming into town, and it's always so nice to see my sister and my niece and my brother-in-law and just hang out with them. And so we're going to be doing that next week, which I'm looking forward to. But faithful listeners, let me know what you do for Thanksgiving, where you go, and your Thanksgiving traditions that you do. Actually, I know somebody who one of their Thanksgiving traditions every year is playing football with a frozen turkey. And I just thought that was really unique. So tell me what your super unique tradition is for Thanksgiving, because I've heard quite a few of them. I'd like to know yours as well. You can contact me. You'll find my contact information listed in the description of this episode. But let's go ahead and read 2 Chronicles 9, 1 through 12 today. As always, I will be reading from the WEB version, but feel free to grab the version of the Bible that you prefer this morning, and also your cup of coffee or your cup of tea for you crazy tea drinkers. Let's go ahead and share a hot beverage together as we enjoy reading God's Word. When the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to test Solomon with hard questions at Jerusalem, with a very great caravan, including camels that bore spices, gold in abundance, and precious stones. When she had come to Solomon, she talked with him about all that was in her heart. Solomon answered all her questions. There wasn't anything hidden from Solomon which he didn't tell her. When the Queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his servants, the attendance of his ministers, their clothing, his cupbearers and their clothing, and his ascent by which he went up to Yahweh's house, there was no more spirit in her. She said to the king, "It was a true report that I heard in my own land of your acts and of your wisdom. However, I didn't believe their words until I came, and my eyes had seen it. And behold, half the greatness of your wisdom wasn't told me. You exceed the fame that I heard. Happy are your men, happy are these your servants, who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be Yahweh your God, who delighted in you, and set you on his throne to be king for Yahweh your God, because God loved Israel, to establish them forever. Therefore he made you king over them, to do justice and righteousness." She gave the king 120 talents of gold, spices in great abundance, and precious stones. There was never before such spice as the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. The servants of Hiram and the servants of Solomon, who brought gold from Ophir, also brought algum trees and precious stones. The king used the algum tree wood to make terraces for Yahweh's house and for the king's house, and harps and stringed instruments for the singers. There were none like these seen before in the land of Judah. King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba all her desire, whatever she asked, more than that which she had brought to the king. So she turned and went into her own land, she and her servants. In the previous chapter, we talked about the great wisdom of Solomon and also how he was a really good king for the prosperity of Israel. And now his fame is spreading all over the world because the Queen of Sheba ends up hearing about him. So this would have been a queen in the land of Sheba. Sheba was probably in modern-day Yemen or modern-day Ethiopia, though it's not 100% sure where the land of Sheba is located. The reason people guess that it was either Ethiopia or Yemen is because those two regions in Solomon's day were known for having queens as their primary leaders, not just kings. And not to mention, Jesus called the Queen of Sheba the Queen of the South. Both Yemen and Ethiopia are south of Israel. So actually, if we turn to Matthew 12, let's read what Jesus says about the Queen of Sheba. He mentions her very briefly in verse 42 as an example of what to do. He says, "The Queen of the South, or the Queen of Sheba, will rise up in the judgment with this generation and will condemn it. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, someone greater than Solomon is here." So Jesus actually commends the Queen of Sheba for going and visiting Solomon because she traveled a great distance to go see him. She heard of his wisdom. And that prompted her to make a 1,400-mile journey just to see him. This would have taken months and months and months. And I mean, when you think of queens, you think of somebody that enjoys their luxuries and their comforts and probably doesn't want to make a dusty, terrible trip through the desert for several months just to meet a man. And yet the Queen of Sheba was willing to do that because she heard of Solomon's great wisdom. And that's why Jesus commends her. He's like, you guys should be more like the Queen of Sheba, who actually pursued wisdom. Instead, you guys refuse to listen to anything that I say, even though I am greater than Solomon in my wisdom. Because, of course, Jesus is the Son of God and has all wisdom available to him. So that's why Jesus is like, you won't even travel a mile to come see the Son of God, yet the Queen of Sheba traverses the entire desert to go meet King Solomon. But let's get into this story a little bit more. So going back to 2 Chronicles 9, 1 through 4, here's what it says. When the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to test Solomon with hard questions at Jerusalem with a very great caravan, including camels that bore spices, gold in abundance, and precious stones. So it's very likely that this queen was very powerful in her own right if she were from the land of Yemen. That would have been an area of trade at this time. So she would have been a queen very knowledgeable in trade. And so it could be that the reason she heard of Solomon was because Solomon, in his own right, was now beginning trading in different countries. You know, we talked in the last chapter about how Solomon was making the Israelites seafarers, and they were going as far as Ophir, which some people actually think is India, to get all sorts of goods and beautiful things from Ophir and bring them back to Israel. So if the Queen of Sheba was also in the trading business, it's very likely that she would have heard about Solomon beginning all of these trade deals in the land of Ophir, which caused her to become very interested in who he was. You know, a powerful king is now entering the picture, and his fame is like legendary. So she hears all of these rumors, and she decides, I'm going to go visit this Solomon guy and really see who this man is, because I don't believe these reports about him. So I'm going to bring him riddles and really hard questions to ask him and see if he can actually answer them. So she came to actually test Solomon and to gain wisdom from him as well, if he was the real deal. So she comes with a great caravan because, you know, when kings and queens visited each other, they came with gifts. You know, I guess it would be pretty rude for the Queen of Sheba to just go and pick Solomon's brain without anything in return. So she comes with a huge caravan, including camels that bore spices, gold in abundance, and precious stones. So it was a big parade. You know, when she entered the city of Jerusalem, I'm sure people were like, oh my goodness, who is here in this city? Like coming to visit King Solomon. This was probably a really exciting thing, you know, for everybody in Jerusalem. So it says that she came to Solomon and she asked him questions about all that was in her heart. She asked him about all the riddles that she prepared for him, not to mention probably political questions and hard cultural questions. She just wanted to see who Solomon was and how he was going to answer these things. She was testing his wisdom. And it says Solomon passed the test in verse 2. He answered all her questions. There wasn't anything hidden from Solomon which he didn't tell her. Every single hard question that she had, Solomon had an excellent answer for. He answered all her questions perfectly because he was a wise man. God actually told Solomon he was going to be the wisest man on the planet. So Solomon used that wisdom to answer all of the queen's questions. And so it says in verse 3, when the Queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his servants, the attendance of his ministers, their clothing, his cupbearers and their clothing, and his ascent by which he went up to Yahweh's house, there was no more spirit in her. So essentially she gave up. She was like, okay, I give up. This man is fantastic. His kingdom is fantastic. I truly believe the reports that I heard now. But notice here that it says after she had seen all these things, that was when she finally believed the reports that she heard, which means that she definitely came as a skeptic of Solomon. And that's another thing, you know, Don't forget, Jesus actually commended the Queen of Sheba. He commended her for getting answers to these questions. So, God does not get upset with us when we have questions for him. It actually says that we should take these questions to God and that he will not be angry with us for asking for wisdom for these questions that we have. I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me where I'm reading something to talk to you guys about it and, I'm doubting something, or I'm going through some kind of heart problem, or I'm just unsure of what the scripture is actually saying. And I'm like, how am I going to present this and talk about this to all the faithful listeners when I don't have a good answer myself, when I'm doubting or, being a skeptic about something I'm reading? I can't tell you how many times I've gone to God with these questions and he just reveals something to me. God answers questions. And if Jesus was commending the Queen of Sheba, who was a skeptic, going and seeking for those answers, God commends us for doing the same thing. Not just being like, oh, I don't believe this Bible. It seems corrupted or it seems too old. I'm just not going to believe it. God doesn't commend that, but he does commend you when you have questions about the Bible where you might not believe something it says, but you take those questions to God and you actually try to find answers to them. You are seeking after God. You are seeking after the truth. And Jesus commends that. So yeah, if you have questions, take them to God. He is not going to get angry at you for your questions. So the Queen of Sheba gets the answers to her questions. And she was so impressed that there is no more spirit in her. So she was dead inside. She saw all of these things and she's like, yeah, this is way beyond me, way beyond my kingdom. I give up. So she says to the king in verse 5, "It was a true report that I heard in my own land of your acts and of your wisdom. However, I didn't believe their words until I came and my eyes had seen it. And behold, half of the greatness of your wisdom wasn't even told to me. You exceed the fame that I heard." So she's like, when I first heard the reports of how wise you were in my own kingdom, I didn't believe them at all. And she's like, and yet they were true. And they weren't even the full truth, because now I'm actually looking and seeing how impressive you actually are, how wise you truly are, and how great Israel has become. She says in verse 7, "Happy are your men. Happy are your servants who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom." Now, this does not mean that Solomon's servants were singing and dancing with joy as they were serving Solomon, but rather they should be happy being in Solomon's presence every single day, being able to hear firsthand his wisdom. So she says, "Blessed be Yahweh your God, who delighted in you and set you on his throne to be king for Yahweh your God, because your God loved Israel to establish them forever." So I don't know if the Queen of Sheba was a Yahweh follower before coming and visiting Solomon, but it kind of sounds like she's a Yahweh follower now. Because don't forget, Solomon wasn't just answering her questions. It actually says in verse 4 that he showed her Yahweh's house, and also he ascended to Yahweh's house, meaning he probably did worship right in front of her. He worshiped Yahweh in front of the Queen of Sheba. We do know that Solomon was actually quite religious with his worship of Yahweh. Even though Solomon unfortunately kind of went off the deep end after a while, at the beginning, he did the daily sacrifices. He participated in the Sabbath day sacrifices and the new moon celebrations and all of the Jewish holidays. He was quite religious in his own right. And so probably, the Queen of Sheba is having an extended stay with Solomon, and she probably asked how worship was done in Israel. That might have been some of the hard questions that she had. Maybe they were religious questions. So she goes and sees Solomon worshiping Yahweh. And now, if she didn't know who Yahweh was before, she certainly does at this point. And she may have even became a Yahweh follower just based upon her speech right here. "Blessed be Yahweh your God, who delighted in you and set you on his throne to be king for Yahweh your God, because your God loved Israel to establish them forever. Therefore, he made you king over them to do justice and righteousness. Sounds to me like she has a genuine faith now. Don't know if she did before, but after this visit to Solomon's kingdom, she certainly does now. And that's what Israel was supposed to be. Israel was supposed to be a light to all the other nations. God actually said, if you follow me, I am going to give you so many blessings. Your crops are going to produce. You're going to have so many children. You're going to have wealth. You're going to have this and that. I'm going to just bless you so much. And you're going to be a light to all these other nations. And when the other nations see Israel being like blessed immensely with all of these things, they're going to be like, what God are they worshiping? How come our gods aren't doing this for us, And so the other nations would be interested in learning about Yahweh. And Solomon kind of did that, especially here in the case of the Queen of Sheba. She realized that God was true, that God loved Israel because of the amount of blessings that Israel received. She gave the king 120 talents of gold, spices in great abundance, and precious stones. There was never before such spice as the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. So the Queen of Sheba gave him 120 talents of gold, so that would be about 3.5 metric tons of gold. Also spices in great abundance and precious stones. So she brought all of these things on these camels. So don't forget, this caravan that she brought with her was huge in order to carry that amount of gold and spices and precious stones. Now, of course, it could possibly be that instead of the queen bringing all of these things on this caravan to Solomon, she brought some of these things and promised Solomon the rest later. Like she entered a trade deal with him or some kind of business deal with him. And over time, the gold, spices, and precious stones ended up coming Solomon's way. But my personal opinion is that she likely brought these things with her, especially if it says that she came with a very great caravan. So that's my guess, is that she actually did hand these things to Solomon personally. Then in verse 10, it kind of switches tunes a little bit, which is sort of interesting. The servants of Huram and the servants of Solomon, who brought gold from Ophir, also brought algum trees and precious stones. The king used algum tree wood to make terraces for Yahweh's house and for the king's house, and harps and stringed instruments for the singers. There was none like these seen before in the land of Judah. So it's kind of an interesting little segue that scripture does right here, where they go from talking about the gold and the spices and the precious stones that the queen brought to all of the successes Israel had on the sea, bringing these things from Ophir. And it very well could be that since the Queen of Sheba was likely a smart businesswoman herself, she was super impressed with all of the things that Solomon was getting from Ophir. These algum trees and these precious stones. It actually says the algum trees, there was none like them ever seen before in the land of Judah. And all of these things contributed with the positive impression that the Queen of Sheba got with Solomon and the land of Israel. So it says in verse 12 that King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba all her desire, whatever she asked, more than that which she had brought to the king. So even though the Queen of Sheba was a very rich woman with tons and tons of gold that she brought along with her, King Solomon was even more wealthy than she was and gave her everything she could want. So she went and returned to her own land, she and her servants. So after staying some time in the land of Israel, after receiving all these beautiful gifts from Solomon, she ends up going back home, making that 1,400-mile trip back to Yemen or Ethiopia or wherever she was from. And it was a trip worth her while. She learned a lot. She realized the reports that she heard of Solomon were the truth. And she also very possibly learned about Yahweh and became a Yahweh follower because in faith, she chose to find answers to her questions. Well, faithful listeners, don't stop asking those questions because you will receive answers to them. hope you all had a great time on today's podcast. I will see all of you tomorrow for an episode from 1 Timothy. Until then, happy listening and God bless.